Greetings, friends. Thank goodness, living in the city, at least in Toronto, you can still find ravines, parkland, green spaces, often by water, by rivers or the lake, where man has not developed, they have not paved over, or they have tried, and sometimes nature has defeated them with flooding. That is why it's illegal to build on the floodplains in Toronto. In an age where we conquer nature and pave it over with the grid, the endless grid, fully expressed in a city like Los Angeles, where there weren't so many rivers or mountains. There's mountains on the outskirts, but you had a wide plain there that was filled up with what the postmodern philosopher Jean Baudrillard called a desert of the real, a lack of meaning or functionality, like a circuit board. The enchantment of the old world is lost. We move through space on a superficial level, and the car became a type of screen, a bubble into which you would move and pass through on a superficial level, gaining in speed, well, until you ran into traffic jams. So nature has a way of reasserting itself, and we should be thankful for that. So the theme of this video is that we should be thankful that man has not fully subjugated nature. Because it's good that God gave us this gift of being able to build things, I suppose. A city is a good thing in principle, but something has gone awry in our current times, where we lose that natural connection. And in Europe, at least, they still have more of the community aspect. They have the local barber, butcher, at least some community still existing in these old villages, hundreds of years old or more. In North America, we've lost that in the suburbs, but it's not just the community feel, it's nature. We live in this mass of urban jungle where we can't even really hear birdsong or experience the wind or the sound of the wind blowing through trees. Recently I was hearing that. It's a very soothing sound, and you get the sense of the space or depth perception as the wind moves through various sections of the trees, and you hear it all around you. It's a very amazing thing. The sky, the sun, basic things that our ancestors, however materially poor, would have been able to enjoy on a more regular basis than many of us can today, and which people in developing countries or so-called poor countries today can at least experience on some basic level that many of us in the West do not experience or have much difficulty in trying to experience. The strange parallel is that the Somalians and the Pakistanis who live in some of the buildings around here rarely come into this river basin here, where I'm standing. As you can see, I'm in the middle of a city with millions and millions of people. Well, several million people. All around. There's thousands of people in this section of the city where I am. And how many people are here? The demographics have changed. The culture has changed. People feel out of their element. People spook easily. In the West, at least, there was this Faustian spirit. Faust, the creation of Goethe, the German poet, was enraptured by the spirit of knowledge and encapsulates the spirit of scientism, at least. The desire to know through knowledge, conquer nature, explore. There is an admirable quality. But ultimately, Faust is not well because he has this imbalance that he loses touch with the ground of reality. And this is what leads us into the situation where the modern world is this indiscriminate grid which destroys everything, eats up everything. So we should be so thankful that God has prevented that from being realized, because it's not that building things are bad. We can build a beautiful city if we could, but we choose not to. So out of mercy, God limits where we can build. He limits with river valleys and floodplains. He limits with mountains. He limits with the oceans. He limits with the Arctic. He limits in other ways too. We cannot go down and we cannot go up. And we cannot always go left or right. We can sometimes go left or right, but not always. Down into the earth, we cannot go very far, and we don't really know what's down there. They have all these diagrams of what's in the center of the earth. Who knows? They say the center of the Earth is a solid iron. Who knows? How can you actually prove that? You can have interesting vibration studies, but anyways, even if it is like that, we cannot go down there. That's the point. We cannot go up into the sky except in airplanes, and whatever you believe about space, effectively, you or I are not going up there anytime soon, at least not in our earthly bodies. So maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe these limits are here to keep reality together. I don't mean that it's an illusion. I believe that everything is very much real. There really is something above and below, and whatever is up in the mountains, whatever is out in Antarctica. That's all there, but in our experience, in our reality, we can't go there, and we should be thankful because we would put a McDonald's there and we would pave it over, and there needs to be some of that wild desolation. We need to have the borderlands, and there needs to be more of a balance. We can't turn everything into a giant grid, and that would never happen anyways, but it's a very bad model to have in mind. Because largely on the part of greed, or just out of some other deep pathology, we make the world ugly, and we do so repeatedly. And God also limited us in our lifespans. We don't live that long. And maybe He did that because we sin so much and He wants to have mercy on us. That might be a little different from the spirit of building and controlling, but it's related. There are these limits that are imposed on us that maybe are for our own good. I'm glad we don't know everything about the universe. It's good to have a sense of mystery and enchantment. Now, I'm not saying you should not know and that knowledge itself is bad. Knowledge can be good, but knowledge is not necessarily good. Knowledge in some cases can definitely lead to bad outcomes. Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil before they were ready to. It wasn't that the tree itself, in principle, should never be eaten from. It was that they were not ready to eat of that fruit. So knowledge is not the same as wisdom. Wisdom is a good thing. Knowledge, a bit more ambiguous, especially as knowledge is associated with worldly power. Wisdom has to do with more than just worldly power, but transcending the world. So I'm not trying to say, oh, we just have to be all superstitious. No, but it is healthy and natural for humans to have some enchantment, some mystery. I don't want to say magic or occult, because there is the demonic, but everything is infused in our whole reality. And what modernity and materialism did, it was try to ignore that, smooth it over. But that reality of the enchantment, the natural, miraculous nature of creation itself, it was always there. It always will be there. And I think now, in our age, we're finally starting to realize that. We're starting to move back from atheism. People are searching. People realize something's not right with this world. We can't breathe the fresh air, experience the sun, the sound of the birds. We can't even experience basic things about reality, which are not kept in a neat box. A little bit of wild on the edges. Every culture needs to have enough of the wild in equilibrium. In equilibrium. At least this is the ideal. In the old maps of the world, as Jonathan Pajot points out in his symbolic interpretations, which he discusses highly effectively on his channel, these maps included the border regions, which were always never fully defined. And those were the regions where strange monsters existed, which were not clearly in one category. It might be half beast, half serpent, half cow with lizard legs. The demons and the monsters in the unknown, on the edge of the world, serve their purpose. The monsters are on the edge of the garden, and they play a similar role, I believe, to the cherubim guarding Eden. initially. And Eden was also a mountain. Eden was a mountain, or is a mountain. Literally, metaphorically, whatever, but in some sense, that's what Eden was. And the monsters and the spirits of the world are all subject to God Almighty. He's the Lord of spirits, Lord of hosts, as he was sometimes known. And that gets in with the enchantment of the world, which is always there, always will be there, and always will be. And you can say, oh, that's all pagan stuff, and you can call me a pagan, but that reality is always there. It can be assimilated under God the Father, or you can worship demons in nature spirits, which I do not approve of. But we seek that connection, we seek that enchantment on a fundamental level. We yearn for it, or at least those of us who cling to what our humanity is. We strive for it. We know that we're missing so much, and a lot of it is very simple, right under our nose. And it is more freeing to me to realize that we don't know what the stars are, at least in a material sense. You can say, oh, well, they're balls of burning gas billions of miles away. We don't really know. These are inferences and deductions and calculations, abstractions. Maybe it's true, but we don't really know in any meaningful sense the way we can say, oh, I know the sun is there. And I'm not an empiricist. Not everything is just empirical sense data. There's more than that. Even in how we think of our world, how we experience reality, the stars may be there, although we don't see them very much. The ancient peoples would have even seen this. Isn't that interesting? The ancient peoples had more contact with the stars than us moderns in the big megalopolises. And yet we have this interpretation of the stars in this ultra-materialistic, cold and empty, dead universe of mostly empty, vast space, of these lifeless objects with all this energy, just transmuting energy and just endless and infinite and destabilizing picture, claiming to know and experience, but we have no real understanding or experience of the stars the way the ancients did, because the ancients would have seen the stars more frequently. They weren't caught up as wage slaves 9 to 5. They had a bit more time, at least at times of the year, to look at the sky. So as the mainstream teaches this materialist view of the universe, it actually imprisons us within a very cold and empty world, and that we're seeking to re-enchant the world. And whether we like it or not, the world is being re-enchanted. And the Antichrist will come, so some of that enchantment can be of the Antichrist, but some of that enchantment can also be of God, and is of God. So knowledge versus wisdom, one cannot bring spiritual growth on its own. Knowledge can cause spiritual damage in many ways. The archetype of the dark wizard, that's what he has, all the knowledge, but he's motivated by pride, and he uses that knowledge for evil. The materialist worldview has produced a vast spiritual crisis. It has made life meaningless, and it has produced a material environment in which we seek and strive to find calm and balance. We strive to find some meaning, like I said before, in terms of nature and in terms of community. We're lacking both, especially in North America, especially. Even at least in Europe, their built world predates the 1800s, so they have some of the old world still built. We don't have any of that in the West. Our whole built world is completely modernist and even postmodernist now. Any stable worldview, as I was saying earlier, has some instability on the borders, but it's in equilibrium. You don't fully enclose the system, and you don't fully leave it open. You have an equilibrium between clear definition and grayness or blurriness. You can say this way about the nation, about any grouping of people, from a family tribe to a historical tradition. There are things which are in the boundary clearly, and there are things on the borderland, and there are things which are outside. The monsters and the strange occurrences on the outside. The dog and the cat, they would be outside well, at least the dog would be outside the house. He'd have his place in the hierarchy. The family would have their place in the hierarchy. Each town might have a church. The church steeple would be the tallest structure there, even only allowed to be the tallest structure for many years. And then Jean Baudrillard mentioning this idea of the map, which perfectly simulates reality. And it never can really do it, but in principle, that's the spirit of our age, moving towards this effort to fully map and represent and capture and simulate all of our world. Like mapping all of Mars and then having people explore what they say Mars is virtually. There won't be any need to send real humans there. You'll just explore it virtually from home. We'll have sent robots there. Robots will do it for us. More abstraction, more loss of the directness of that connection, because it's now being further abstracted by robots and by chains of command and smaller groups of people that you have to trust, people you don't know face to face and have never met. Baudrillard spoke of a map which was made of a kingdom commissioned by some king, and the map ends up being a complete, perfect replica of his kingdom, and at that point they can't tell which is the original. And then that breaks down into hyperreality, where everything is a constant reproduction of everything else, and you lose sight and you lose touch with what the original was. Now, Baudrillard was a postmodern guy who spoke a lot of often nonsense. I don't highly recommend him, but he did have some points there. He did see something there, that we've spiraled into this abstraction of constantly wanting to move, and we lose touch with the particular, the local, the real. Hasta luego, amigos.